Hi friends, I hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to a new sketchbook session video. I appreciate the positive response to the first one. If you haven't watched that video, I'll link it in the description area. My plan for this video is to work on composition. I feel that I've been in a rut when it comes to my collage compositions. I seem to be using the same ones repeatedly. Instead of using paper, I thought it'd be a good exercise to use paint. I think it'll loosen me up when creating. I won't be concerned about cutting or tearing paper into a certain size or shape. We'll see how it goes. So let's get started. I'll be using the same altered book that I used in the first video. A reminder that I like to place wax paper behind the pages I'm working on. I didn't glue any of the pages together to add thickness, so the wax paper protects the other pages in case paint seeps through to the other side. I brought out these 3 flat brushes in 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch. First, I'll be using this new bottle of Blake's matte acrylic paint in Yellow Bright. I didn't think ahead about what color paint I'll be using, so I'll show you each paint bottle as I use it. I'm applying yellow in 3 different sizes, shapes, and areas to set up a good base for a balanced composition. Next, I'm using Paper Artsy's Midnight, which is a good opaque dark blue. In my previous video, I worked on 2 adjoining pages at the same time. For this video, I decided to work on only 1 page at a time. I didn't have enough light pink left in the bottle, so I'm mixing white and pink deep to get that color. This may be common sense, but I want to mention it. I'm adding pink to the white because I want the pink to be very light. I would have done the opposite if I wanted to just slightly lighten the pink deep paint. As you can see, I'm painting larger shapes. I'm leaning into the loosening up part of this session while being mindful of having a balanced composition. The same color is placed in different areas around the page, which creates balance. Next, I'm adding another light value with this aqua paint, filling in this awkward center shape, then starting to add smaller shapes. Adding smaller shapes in different areas overlapping the larger shapes helps to make the composition cohesive. This first composition is at a good stopping point. Let's go on to the next one. I decided to change the color palette for this composition, starting with a good light opaque Celadon. The first page had an all-over composition. I didn't want to create the same style, so this one will have a horizontal composition. And as you will see, the color palette is completely different as well. Again, I'm placing the same color in different areas, sizes, and shapes to lay the groundwork for a balanced and cohesive composition. Next, I brought out a good mid-tone muted gray, Nimbus gray, which at first glance looks close in color to the Celadon. I had to step away for a moment. During that time, the paint dried. Now you can see the difference between the two colors. Both are good base colors for this composition. Continuing to build a light value base, I brought out green blue light. It pairs nicely with Celadon and the Nimbus gray. At this stage, I'm starting to size down the shapes. Now that I have a good light base, it's time to start adding darker colors. Teal green is a good dark color that coordinates with the other colors. So far, this color palette is evoking a calm feeling. I brought out this 3/8 inch angle brush to use to draw a shape that has different angles. It's good for drawing and good for filling in an angled shape. I was unsure of the exact shape that I wanted at first. I wanted enough of the Celadon to show through at different areas underneath this shape. Working in a sketchbook gives me the opportunity to feel comfortable about being unsure when creating. There isn't any pressure for a perfect finished artwork. I brought out yellow oxide because the composition needed another color that was muted, but stood out a bit from the other colors. I thought it was a perfect base color for the remaining unpainted area. I didn't want to use one of the existing colors on top of the yellow oxide, so I brought out red deep. It will add a punch of color, for lack of a better description. Again, I'm using an angle brush to draw a shape that partially overlaps on top of the yellow oxide and Nimbus gray. This shape will tie the two areas together to further add cohesiveness to the composition. I felt like the composition needed another smaller amount of red in the lower area to balance it. Looking back now, the step of painting off-white on the negative space seems unnecessary. At the time, I was distracted by the text showing in these areas. The even number of red elements looked awkward to me, so I added this long, narrow shade to balance the composition. It was a bit difficult to paint this area while filming. Next time I'll move the collage around to make it easier to paint and still give you a good view of it. Now I think this composition is finished. I'm happy with the way both turned out. Both have areas that have inspired me to use in my collage practice. I'll talk more about each one at the end. Let's go on to the next sketch. I brought out some neglected paint for this next sketch. I'm starting with Blick's Artist Acrylic Series 1 in red oxide. I checked on Blick's website and it looks like they don't offer this exact series of paint anymore. Urix, I believe that's how you pronounce it, which is owned by Blick's, has a similar acrylic paint. I haven't used it, so I can't speak on it. I'm using this fine tip brush. I'm guessing it's size 0. The markings are worn off. Anyway, I'm using it to draw the composition I had in mind. I didn't want to stop and look for a pencil, so a thin brush will work just as well. In my opinion, a good collage composition has overlapping elements. It adds cohesiveness to the collage. This is why you see me draw the elements overlapping each other. Now that the composition is drawn, I'm starting to paint with the 3/8 inch angle brush and red oxide paint. I hope you can see how using an angle brush helps with painting within a shape that has many angles. I would suggest having at least one size in your art supplies. Again, I brought out the off-white paint to cover some of the text area. And again, I think it was an unnecessary step in hindsight, but it was part of my process at the time. The next paint is ivory black. You probably know that old black acrylic paint can get lumpy. I'm not sure when I bought this paint, but it's old. Like I said previously, Blick doesn't sell this paint anymore. I wanted to see if I could make it work for sketching purposes. I don't like to waste paint. I tried using a plastic palette knife to see if it would help smooth out the lumps. While I decided if I wanted to continue using the ivory black, I brought out Naphthol Red Light. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's a bright orange red that leans towards transparency. I added a few layers to see if I could get it to be opaque. The next neglected acrylic paint I brought out is this emerald green. If you watch my video on muted complementary color collages, you know that using red and green together is not one of my favorite color combinations. By using it more often in my sketchbook, I hope to become more comfortable with it. I first painted a light wash of green to see if I like the placement of it. It's easier to cover a light wash of color, so I'd like to do this step if I'm unsure of using it. I took out the long section of the video where I tried to decide if I wanted to keep the green. As you can see, I decided to keep it and added more layers to get it opaque. The composition was looking dark, so I brought out matte acrylic paint in sage blue. At this point, the other colors were painted in only one element. I thought it'd be better to balance the composition if I painted the sage blue in at least two elements in opposite areas of the page. To continue balancing the composition, I added Naphthol Red to the small rectangle at the top of the page, then added another layer of it to the circular element to smooth out the existing layers and to try to darken it. I decided that the composition needed a bit more light value besides the off-white, so I mixed some of it into the sage blue to lighten it. I didn't want to mess around with the ivory black to get it smooth enough to paint, so I brought out matte acrylic black to paint the remaining elements. If this was a paper collage, the overlapping areas would be the color of the paper that was on top of it. I decided to paint those areas black for this sketch. I think it adds a nice detail. This sketch is finished, so on to the final one. I switched to bright colors for this final sketch. I'm starting by using this matte acrylic paint in yellow green light. Instead of sketching the whole composition at once, I decided to sketch the shapes as I go. I'm using the 3/8" angle brush to fill in the shape. Next, I brought out again the green-blue light for the next shape. My plan is to create a simple, balanced, and cohesive composition with large, mismatched shapes. I'm hoping to make the shapes interesting looking. If I do decide to create a collage from this sketch, the shapes will be made with pattern paper, so that will help with making it a good composition. The composition needed a dark value, so I brought out green deep. This color needs multiple coats for full opacity. I do admit that this color palette for this sketch is basic, which is okay. It's good to use this type of color palette so the emphasis is on the composition. The last color is another dark value, dark blue light. As I was creating, I thought it'd be good to have a dark value ground for a strong contrast with the lighter elements. The final steps are adding a third layer of green deep so there's enough contrast, adding dark blue light in the overlapping area, and add a cutout shape inside the green-blue light shape. This shape looked a bit heavy to me. I like the illusion that the shape was cut out as if it was made with paper, so you could see the ground cover through it. This last sketch is finished. Let's have a final review. I like both of these compositions and can see making collages from them. I like the color palette of the second one. It's probably because I've been making muted color collages lately. Both are balanced and cohesive. Both of these compositions are balanced and cohesive as well. I'm a bit more intrigued by this one. I feel like it would be a good exercise to see if adding pattern paper would elevate it. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video. In my next one, I'll be using at least 2 of these compositions to create paper or mixed media collages. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this video. See you in the next one. Take care.